Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev, and I wanted to do a video. I've done a couple videos on JavaScript errors in the past, so if you look up JavaScript errors Alex Merced on YouTube, you'll find those videos. But I just wanted to do a quick video on some of the most typical errors for beginners when working with JavaScript. So I'm going to hit up 3 different errors. That's going to be sort of the module cannot be found, 2 is not defined, and 3 properties of undefined. Okay, so we're going to hit up these 3 errors in this video. So first off, let me create a file. Okay, so I'm going to actually open up my terminal. Okay, so I'm going to do everything from terminal. So I'm going to create, and again, I'm assuming that you have Node installed. Okay, but let's see here. I'm going to create a file called touch. We'll call it file1.js because it's JavaScript. Okay, so I'm going to go in this file and I'm just going to do hello world, console.log. Hello world. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to do node file2.js. Oh, that didn't do what I expected it to do. It gave me an error. So you see I got this error that says module not found. And whenever you're reading a JavaScript error, what you really want to do is just kind of skip to the top. Okay, so you'll see here like the first thing the error is going to do is tell you what file. And again, this is slightly different if you're using deno or bun. So this is specifically talking to node. It's going to have like this sort of like, hey, here's where the error is. What you really care about is right here where it says error. You want to read this line because this is going to tell you specifically what the error is. So what it's telling you is it cannot find the module. What it really means is it can't find the file. Okay? So it's saying, hey, I can't find the files. But when I take a look, and this is telling me what file it's looking for. There's 2 things I should look at when I'm looking at this. What the file path is. So is this the file path I expected? Like, is this looking for the file in the folder that I think it should be looking for? In this case, it is. Okay, that's the file that I'm working out of, errors, so that makes sense. But is the file the same name as I expected? Wait a second, it's called file2.js, but my file is called file1.js. So the idea is it didn't find the file because I told it to, run the wrong file name. Okay, and then if I do this, if I do node cheese/file1.js, okay, I'm going to get that error again. But wait a second, that's the right file name, file1.js. But wait a second, it's looking for it in the wrong folder. Okay, so bottom line is take a moment and read your errors, because oftentimes just this little bit, again, I wouldn't spend too much time reading this. This is called the stack. It kind of shows you like the chain of things that happened causing the error. That'll make more sense to you as you become more advanced, but honestly, oftentimes, this is really all you need. So that's why I always say in JavaScript, scroll to the top of the error output for the most relevant information. And Python's actually the opposite, where that error statement is going to be at the bottom. So it'll be the call stack first, that step by step, and then the errors at the bottom. Okay, and I forget how it works in Ruby off the top of my head. It's been a while. Okay. So that's what module not found is. So bottom line is whenever you see module not found is, I'm going to assure you that you either have the wrong file name or you're trying to run the file from the wrong folder. Okay, and remember, capitalization matters. So if it was capital, like for example, if I do this, node file1.js, okay, I'm still going to get the wrong error because see, it's looking in the right folder and that looks kind of like the file name. But file1 with a capital F is different than file1 with a lowercase .js. Bottom line is you see this error, you want to make sure that you're referring to the right folder in the right place. So look at the file path and make sure it's looking where you think it should be looking. Okay? Okay, second error, it's not defined. So let's see here. Let's say I take out the quotation marks and I write hello. Okay? Now if I do node file1.js, so it's the right file name, so there should be no errors regarding opening the file, I get this error. Okay, it says hello is not defined. What it's saying is that whatever this is, so this is not a string because there's no quotation marks around it. So whenever you have like words with no strings, it's assuming that these are tokens. Okay, which can mean, they can be keywords like the word function or var or whatnot. But if it's not some sort of reserved word, meaning some word built into JavaScript, then it thinks it's a variable. Okay, so it sees hello here with no quotation around it, and so it's like, this is a variable. Let me go access what's inside the variable. but I've never created this variable. Okay, so then it's going to throw me this error saying, hey, you never defined what hello is. How am I supposed to know what hello is? Okay, so I got to make sure that I define it. Okay, so let me go define hello. Const hello, and again, capitalization matters, equals cheese. Okay, I still get the error though. Okay, but this time the error is slightly different. It says cannot access hello. So now it read the file, so it knows I did define hello. It's like, hey, you did do it, but you did it after I used it. Because again, the JavaScript engine is reading it one line at a time. Okay, so it's like, wait a second, you want me to use it here, but I actually haven't created the thing yet. So that's not how this works. Okay, so it's telling me, what's really telling me, it says, hey, Alex, you need to initialize, create the variable before you use it. So this line needs to come first. And now if I run the file, it runs just fine. Okay, now another mistake people will make is they'll do something like this. Okay, still same error. Cheese is not defined. You're like, wait a second, I never created a variable named cheese. What happened is you forgot the quotation marks around your string. You meant cheese as a string, but you forgot the quotation marks. So JavaScript doesn't know that. It just knows that you are trying to say this variable should equal the value of this variable that you've never created. So it's going to give you this is not defined. What do? Go back and look at your code. You're like, okay, wait a second, cheese is not defined. And then ask yourself, where do I define cheese? And when I look at this a little bit deeper, I realize, wait a second, I never meant to define cheese because it was never meant to be a variable. It was supposed to be a string. Okay, so is not defined meaning it's not created. Okay, now there's one weird situation that's with the word var, or the keyword var. So if I do this, console.log hello, and I do var hello equals cheese. Okay, notice it works. Look, no, I didn't get an error. Instead, I just get undefined. Okay, now this is really confusing. This is why generally you don't want to use var. Okay, just generally like there's no reason really in modern JavaScript to be writing var anymore when you can be using const and let to define your variables. Okay, because you're gonna get better errors, and better errors help you make your code work better. So a lot of people are like, well, var, I don't get the error. That's the reason you don't use it. Okay, because basically what's happening is that var hoists the declaration of the variable, which means it will declare the variable before the first line. So the variable is being declared. That's why you're not getting that initialization error. The variable is being initialized before any code is run, but it's technically not to line 3 that I assigned it a value. So technically I have this variable with no value until I assign it on line 3, but I'm using it on line 1, so it just tells me that it's undefined. And I could be staring at this for hours thinking, it's like, wait a second, I gave the variable a value right here. Why is it coming up as undefined? It's because if you don't know exactly how the JavaScript engine's handling it, you're going to run into a whole world of pain. Now, if I change this to let, this is going to be a lot easier of an error for me to fix. Because if I change this to let or const, okay, I get that initialization error. And that makes it a lot clearer. Move the line up. I need to initialize the variable before I use the variable. Okay, so bottom line, don't use var, use const and let when declaring your variables. I generally always declare things as const until there's a reason for me to declare it as let. Because you're more likely to get an error with const, and you want to be likely to get errors when there's problems. That way you know there's a problem. Okay? You don't want to use you don't want to use the style that's less likely to throw you an error when something goes wrong. Because then you won't realize something is going wrong and then finding what's wrong is going to be that much harder. You generally do want your code to be more punishing in errors because it prevents much bigger chains of errors. Okay, so that's that error. One more error. Okay, properties of undefined. Okay, so let's say I have this. Let's create an object. So my object equals. Okay, and then it's going to have one property, name, and it's going to be my name, Alex Merced. Actually, let's also add my age 37, at least for a little bit longer. Now let's say I want to console.log the object. Okay, that's fine. Now let's say I want to console.log a property of the object, my object.name. Okay, so let's see if that all works out fine. And see it works. I can print out the whole object. I can print out one of the properties of the object. But what if I print out a property that doesn't exist on the object? Console.log myObject.friends. Okay, that's fine. It's just basically what happens that any property on the object that isn't defined is just treated as undefined. That's fine. But what happens if I do something like this? Friends dot best. Okay, like best friend. Okay, I'm going to get this error. And this error always confuses people a whole lot. It's really not that confusing once you realize what it means. But basically what it's saying is like, hey, I cannot find the property best. Okay? And what most people do is they focus on the word best. They focus like, okay, well, something's wrong with the word best. There's nothing wrong with the word best. Okay, it's saying, hey, you asked me to find a property on an undefined object. Okay? So the problem isn't that best isn't the problem. The problem is that friends is undefined. Okay? Because undefined should never have properties. So whenever you try to access a property of undefined, which is an object built into JavaScript to represent a lack of anything, then it's like, wait a second, that shouldn't be possible, so it's going to throw you an error to know you're trying to do that. Okay? Which can be a frustrating situation to go into, especially when you're working with like data from like third parties, because what happens is that not everything, you might get an array of data from a third party, and not every object in that array has all the same properties. So oftentimes you may run into this, like the situation where you keep, getting this particular error. Okay, there's a couple different ways you can solve this. Okay, cool. Okay, cannot read properties of undefined. Now, sort of before some of the more recent features in JavaScript, generally what you would do to deal with this situation is you'd have to check to make sure that this is not undefined before you try to access the subproperty. So I would do something like this. I would wrap it in an if statement, and I would say my objects.friends, and then I would put this line of code in there. The reason being is that, again, undefined is treated as false. It's a falsy value. So in that case, if friends is undefined, this if statement will just skip. Okay, so this line of code will never run, so the error never gets triggered, and it won't break my whole program. Okay, and see, it just runs the 2 lines of code that do exist. Problem is writing out all these if statements, especially when you're talking about like lots of properties that you might be working with for really giant objects. You might be working from like API data. Well, that gets pretty crazy. So another way you could have done this is you could use what's called a ternary operator, which is just basically an inline if statement. So then what I would do is I would do like my object.friends question mark. That'll say, hey, is my object.friends truthy or falsy? If it's truthy, it'll try to access the property, and if not, it'll just access nothing. Okay, it'll just return null. That's one way I could do it. Okay, and see, it just ends up console logging null because that property is falsy. But at least I'm not getting the error. Okay, so this could be a situation where I'm going through like 100 different people. I'm like looping through 100 different people objects, each of them with some of them have friends and some of them don't. And this way I don't end up having an error when it loops over the people who don't have friends. Okay, but more recently in JavaScript, they added a new operator called the nullish chaining operator, or is it optional chaining? And what you can do is you put, I think the question mark, I always get it confused if it's before or after the dot, but if you put the question mark before the dot, okay, what it'll do is that if a value is undefined, it just stops. So essentially what happens is it's going to go here and say, hey, is friends truthy or falsy? If friends has no value, if it's undefined, it just stops. It's going to return undefined. It won't let you go any further because it knows anything else is going to be undefined, and you don't end up getting this undefined error. This is super useful when you run into that situation where there's going to be like you're looping over like 100 people, and sometimes they're not going to have friends. You can use this to help you handle that. If it's a situation where everyone should have a friends array per se, then you wouldn't want to use this. It may make the error go away, but you don't want the error to go away if it should be a problem when it's a problem. Okay, so be careful how you use this. You have to think about sort of like what what is my purpose? Like, is there a situation where I have inconsistent data? Then this is your best friend. If the data should be consistent, then the error should be thrown. Then you don't want to use this, okay? Because you want to be aware that the data is inconsistent. Okay, so hopefully those show you how to deal with these 3 errors. Again, that's the whole module not found, where it's a wrong file name, wrong folder, is not defined. You hadn't defined the variable yet. Or 3, a property of undefined, where you have a subprop, you're accessing a property of a variable which you think is an object but is actually undefined. Okay, my name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Have a great day and enjoy. Again, like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you all later.